Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Sir.
Sure. Hello, good evening, everybody.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
On कर दे तो कैमरा. Today our discussion will be about the basic components of the internal combustion engine. Basically, the last class we discussed about the air standard cycles. Today I've got two sheets to explain. As you can see, the first one is regarding IC engine. This is the schematic diagram. Even not a very good diagram. I am not happy with this diagram, but you know, we are more conversant with drawing in the board, blackboard, with a chalk and with a dot pen. It was difficult to draw, but I'll explain it to you, and I'll give you a better diagram also sometime later. Now this diagram is there also in the book, but it has to be explained. The first thing is that you can see a cylinder here, the upper part, and then inside that cylinder there is a piston, which is again cylindrical. And there are two valves on the top of the cylinder. You can see the cylinder is closed, the one side, and that side there are two holes. And sitting on that holes are two valves. Now, actually, this is the disposition of the engine, how the engine looks like. That is what we are now trying to tell you. So two valves are there. You can see one is suction valve, another is discharge valve. And two pipelines are connected to the valves. One is the intake manifold, another is the exhaust manifold. So these intake manifold and exhaust manifolds are two pipelines. And through the intake manifold, air and fuel is coming into the cylinder. Actually, ideally, I have drawn this diagram with reference to a petrol engine. You know, I told you that there are two kinds of engines, petrol engine and diesel engine. Reciprocating type. We are all discussing reciprocating. In this syllabus, we are confining ourselves to reciprocating engines. That means where there will be a reciprocating component and the movement of the reciprocating part will be converted into rotation. Now that is the reciprocating engine, the piston cylinder arrangement. But there is another variety of engine, which is the rotary engine. That is the turbine, which is in a different course it will be taught. Now for this reciprocating engine, there are two kinds. One is the spark ignition type, spark ignition SI. Another is compression ignition CI. These things, these terms you will come to know. Need not be very much worried about that. These terms will be used millions of times. Spark ignition, compression ignition, and in short we will call them SI and CI. SI stands for spark ignition. I have drawn the schematic diagram of a spark ignition engine. Because it is spark ignition, there is the requirement of a spark to produce the ignition of the fuel. Spark ignition engines are those engines where the fuel is to be ignited by providing a spark. Now for that there is a spark plug. not very clearly understandable from the picture, but this is basically a spark plug. You might have seen it. That means there are two electrodes. Two electrodes are there, and these two electrodes are separated by a very small gap of air, very small gap. And these two electrodes are connected to the two terminals of a battery. So that, I mean, there is a potential difference acting across the two electrodes. This is the meaning of the electrode. But in our engine, we have to produce a spark, and for that our requirement of potential difference is 12,000 volts. And sometimes it may be 15 to 16,000 volts. So a very high voltage is required for the generation of the spark. And this is not possible with a battery. So what we are doing is that we are going to have an ignition circuit, electrical circuit. I'll also discuss that. In that circuit, we are using a source of EMF, that is a DC battery. And that battery EMF will be around maybe 6 volts. And from that, we are going to generate 12,000 volts. For that, there is an electrical circuit. How it is going to be done, that is a different story. We will go into it much later. But now let us accept that across the two electrodes, there is a potential difference of 12,000 volts. But this 12,000 volts is not continuous. We do not want it always. We want it only for a particular instant of time, when we want the fuel to ignite. And when we will want the fuel to ignite, that is when we want the combustion in the cycle. Because this is an engine, it is working on a thermodynamic cycle. So in that thermodynamic cycle, there is a particular instant when therefore there will be ignition and combustion. And the spark should occur at that instant. For that occurrence of the spark at that particular instant, again there is a mechanism. That is again an electrical phenomenon. So one thing is this spark to be generated, that is 12,000 volts has to be produced from 6 volts or maybe 12 volts. This step up is to be done. That is one part of the electrical circuit. Second part is to make the second part of the electrical circuit is to create the spark only when we want. And for that, there is a very interesting circuit loop. So that is one part, and now you can see that this spark plug is sitting at one end of the cylinder, in between the two valves. Two valves, one is suction and there is discharge valve. So then we come to the piston. Just down, go down and you will see the piston. It is again a reciprocating type of component which is free to reciprocate. The important thing is that the cylinder here is fixed. Why the cylinder will be fixed? That reason is that the cylinder is connected to an engine body. Engine body is fixed. The engine body is fixed to a car. So the cylinder is not moving, it is fixed. And the piston is capable of moving up and down. Now here I am telling up and down. That means the piston is moving about its axis, which is vertical. That is why it is called a vertical engine. That is a classification of the engine. But then there is another class, which is a horizontal engine, where the entire thing is such that the axis of the cylinder and the axis of the piston both are horizontal. So here you learn another point, that if the axis of the cylinder and piston are vertical, it is a vertical engine. If the axis of the cylinder and the piston are horizontal, it is a horizontal engine. Again, I have shown you a diagram where there is only one cylinder. But normally engines may have more than one cylinders. But this is a single cylinder engine which I have shown to make the thing simple. There may be 2 cylinder, 3 cylinder, 4 cylinder, 6 cylinders, 8 cylinders. Those are called multi-cylinder engines. But every cylinder is identical. There is a cylinder, there are 2 valves, there are intake and exhaust manifold, spark plug is there, and the piston is there, and the piston is connected. Piston is movable, and the movable components are the piston, the connecting rod, and the crank and the crankshaft. These are the movable components. All other components are static. So now you can see the piston, connecting rod, crank. Just if you can see me, you see my hand. Can you see my hand? See, this palm is just like the piston, and this forearm is just like the connecting rod. This arm is the, I don't know if you can say what is the top arm, is the crank, and the rotating axis in the shoulder, that is just like the crankshaft axis. This is to make the thing simpler. Now, our requirement is to produce a rotation of the crankshaft. For that, we want the piston to move up and down. For that, we want the gas which is on the top side of the piston, between the piston and the cylinder head. That is the portion where some gas is entrapped. Why it is entrapped? Because the valves are not open when the gas is entrapped. If you think that the gas is entrapped, then the valves are not open, the valves are closed. Valves are again moving components. They can move. They can either close the opening or they can make the opening open. And when they will close and when they will open, they are not closing and opening simultaneously together. They have got their own time of opening and closing. And when they are going to open, when they are going to close, that is again another story. That is in the hands of the designer of the engine. The engine has been designed by a designer. So the designer has to choose when the valve has to open, which valve has to open when, and which valve has to close when. When means this when, this thing refers to the rotation of the crank and the crankshaft. So piston connected rod crank, the crank is coming to a axis. I have shown the crankshaft axis. This crankshaft axis is where the rotation comes. And this rotation of the crankshaft, if it is once about its axis, that is 360 degrees, one complete rotation. During that, the piston will move up and down only once. You just think whether it is correct or not. That means the piston reciprocation, downward movement and upward movement, one pair of movements, one movement downward, one movement upward, that constitutes 2 strokes, because the piston is moving from one extreme position to another extreme position. Piston, when it moves, it is moving from an extreme position near the valves. It is not touching the valves. It is not touching the spark plug. So near the valves, there is a position which is called top dead center. We are using top because this is a vertical engine. Had it been a horizontal engine, we could have called it an inner dead center. But it is a dead center. And the piston comes down to the other dead center, which is called the bottom dead center. Between the top and the bottom dead center, the distance we are calling as the stroke length. Yesterday, I mean the last class, we have explained what is the stroke length L. So when the piston moves from the top dead center to the bottom dead center, the distance traveled by the piston is L.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, why do we call top dead center and bottom dead center as dead centers?
Yeah, because you see, dead means dead, dead. That means because the piston, when it reaches that point, the piston suffers a change in its direction of motion. So when the piston, just imagine, suppose you are the piston. When you are going upward, you reach the end of your journey, and then you have to come downward. It's not possible instantaneously. Though it is, I mean, we are thinking it's instantaneous, but there is a point where the velocity has to change. You are moving upward, piston is moving upward, there is an upward velocity. That velocity gradually has to decrease. It has to come to a zero velocity. Then downward velocity has to start and it has to increase. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that is the reason basically. The piston
Okay,
is
sir.
not moving with an uniform velocity. That is important here. The velocity of the piston is not uniform. It is moving upward. As it is moving upward, it loses velocity. There is a deceleration. And at the top point, there is a dead center which we are terming. There the velocity becomes zero. Absolutely. Velocity becomes zero. And then the reversal of the direction of the piston occurs. That is the reason why it is called dead center. Dead because at that point the velocity suffers a reversal, comes to zero. From, if you consider the upward velocity to be positive, so from the positive it becomes zero and then it becomes negative.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Please continue, sir.
Is that okay?
Okay, sir. Please continue.
Okay. Then top dead center because it is at the topmost point of the journey. Topmost point of the journey of the piston. That is why top dead center. Similarly, there is another dead center when the piston comes down and achieves the lowest point of its travel. Again, at the lowest point, it has to reverse its direction. So it has to attain zero velocity there. From the downward velocity, downward velocity must be zero at that point, and then the upward velocity should generate. That is why it is the other dead center, and we call it bottom dead center because this is a vertical engine. The axis of the engine is vertical. So that's why we are using the term top and bottom. Had it been a horizontal engine, same engine, if you consider the axis to be horizontal, axis of the cylinder to be horizontal, then again the top dead center, that is the dead center which is near to the valves, we call it inner dead center. Inner, IDC. Instead of TDC, we call it IDC. And the other dead center, which is the other side, on the other side, the open side of the cylinder, we call it outer dead center. ODC. IDC, ODC. For a horizontal engine, inner dead center, outer dead center. For a vertical engine, top dead center, bottom dead center. Okay, these two terms you have to imprint in your mind. People will ask you questions involving TDC, BDC, IDC, ODC. These are all technical terms. They will not use the entire word. Entire thing. Whenever they say the IDC, it is inner dead center, you have to understand the engine is horizontal. When it is TDC, it is top dead center, the engine is vertical. Okay. This part is clear. See, these are such things, very rudimentary, but we have to go slow on this. Because slowly you have to know these things. These are the hardware of the engine.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, one question, sir. If the engine is like in a V configuration and
Yes.
the crank angle is 90 degree, so that is like 45 degree inclined in both sides. So what will be that called then? Top dead
That is
center or
also-
inner dead center?
Yeah. That you see what you have said is also a real engine where it is a multi-cylinder engine. This what you are telling is a multi-cylinder engine. I am just describing the previous thing, that is a single cylinder engine. We have only one cylinder. But if there are two cylinders, it is a two-cylinder engine. Now, when the two cylinders are in the same axis, like if the axis of the two cylinders are same, it can be same, it can be opposed, then it is inline engine. But if the axis of the two cylinders are inclined to each other by an acute angle, like say 60 degree or 45 degree or 90 degree, as you have said, we call it a V-type engine. V-type. That is one cylinder, it has a axis, and there is another cylinder, it has got another axis. These two axes are inclined at an angle, maybe 90 degrees or maybe 60 degrees, maybe 120 degrees. That is why it is called a V-type configuration. And for that case, it is nice that you have asked the question, very good question. We would have gone to it. The reason, the point is that V-type, if you consider a V-type engine, considering two cylinders, having the two cylinders inclined to each other at certain angle, it has got two different cylinders, two different pistons, two different cranks, two different connecting rods, two different cranks, but only one crankshaft. Crankshaft axis is one. That means the power which is generated from the two cylinders are coming to a single shaft. It is coming to the same shaft. Do you follow? Here you can see in this engine what I have drawn, power is coming from the piston to the connecting rod to the crank to the crankshaft. That is the root. That is the root of the power. This is for a single cylinder engine. For a multi-cylinder engine, there will be two cylinders, two pistons. There may be three cylinders, three pistons, four cylinders, four pistons. But crankshaft will be only one. Only one crankshaft. That means the entire power goes to the same output shaft. Crankshaft is the output shaft. Our reason is that, see, why we are going for multi-cylinder engine? Because we want to produce more power. And when we want to produce more power, we have to get the power at the same shaft, at a particular shaft. So that see, if we get power at four different shafts, for four different cylinders, if we get power at four different shafts, it is not going to help us much. Because ultimately, our objective is to harness the power. How to harness the power? Power, that is the rotational shaft, we have to couple it to some machine. So if we have a four-cylinder engine or a V-type engine, we have to derive the output at a particular shaft, so that that particular output shaft is connected now to a generator or to a motor or to something where you want to produce power. You understand? Hello? So, as you are telling about a V-type of engine, have you got your answer?
Yes, sir. Yes, understood.
Yeah?
Yes, sir. Understood, sir. Understood, sir. Yes.
Okay, fine. Next thing is, look slightly lower in the diagram. look to the connecting rod. This connecting rod is not a rod of a constant cross section. That means this is not a rod having a circular cross section. And this cross section is varying, changing from the point where it is connected to the piston to the point where it is connected to the crank. That is the connecting rod. Through its entire length, the connecting rod cross-sectional area is changing. That is number one. Number two is that this changing cross-sectional area, changing cross-section, is of the form of an I section. I. You have seen iron channels having cross-section looking like I. This connecting rod also, cross-section is just like I. Why? That we'll have to tell you. I can tell you shortly now, at more elaborate way later. You will also read it when you discuss the machine design. Because this connecting rod is a component which will be subjected to tension, that is tensile force, and compression or compressive force. Very quickly, this direction of force acting on the connecting rod will change. How quickly? See, it may change in, suppose the engine is running at say 2000 revolutions per minute. Say 2400 revolutions per minute. That means 2400 by 60. That is 40 revolutions per second. Per second, the crankshaft is rotating by 40 times. Then, you know, there will be the variation of stress in the connecting rod per second to the tune of 120 times. That means in 1 second, the connecting rod changes from being under tensile force to being under compressive force. Again under tensile, again under compressive. So this thing is there. So as a result of that, the connecting rod is going to, 120 times means 60 tensions and 60 compressions for a 60 revolution per second engine. If I am talking about 40 revolutions per second, 40 tensions, 40 compressions per second, you can understand what will be the time for each cycle of tension and compression. So this, at this high frequency, the stress reversal will occur, and as a result of that, the connecting rod will be subjected to alternative tensile, compressive, and bending moments, bending stresses. There is a chance that it will be subjected to fatigue. Fatigue is a phenomenon which is developed in all kinds of components having a variational stress. Fatigue is, once it creeps in the component fails due to fracture or rupture. And because of this fracture, if there is a failure in the component, then the engine will break. That is why this connecting rod is made of such a configuration so that it will have a high fatigue stress. It is made of such a process that manufacturing process is forging, and it has to go through heat treatment also, that is Ostempering process. So basically, as a result of that, it gains in its capability to handle fluctuational stress. So when it is manufactured, it is prescribed that it will be able to withstand, say, 50 lakh cycles of stress reversal or 1 crore cycle of stress reversal. So when it is used in an engine, when the engine runs, say, for, say, 2 lakh, 3 lakh, 3 lakh, 4 lakh miles, the connecting rod will not have any problem. You understand?
So bending stress is due to what?
Pardon?
So the connecting rod means it experiences bending forces.
Yes.
Due to what? Due to which forces?
Because you see, if you consider a free body diagram of the connecting rod, if you consider, you have done free body diagram?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So now just consider the connecting rod only. Forget the crank, forget the piston. Just consider the connecting rod, consider its 2 ends. At the end where the piston is there, it is connected to the piston through a pin, which is called piston pin, also called Gajan pin. G-U-T-G-E-O-N, Gajan pin. So at that pin, when the connecting rod is, when the piston is moving down, suppose the piston is moving down, a compressive force comes along the axis of the connecting rod. Do you realize that when the piston is coming down?
Yes, yes, yes.
The compressive force is coming along the connecting rod axis. And what happens to the other end, where it is the crank end? I mean, the crank pin is there. There also, when the compressive load is coming from one end, other end also behaves as a fixed end. I mean, there is also another reaction force going upward. I mean, that is also compressive. So
Yes.
it is like that, supposing that the bar of the connecting rod at the 2 ends is subjected to 2 compressive forces. When the piston is coming down, and when the, just consider the reverse case, when the piston is moving up, then the end which is connected to the piston, that is the piston pin end, is subjected to a tension. And similarly, on the other side, the crank end, there also will be tensile stress. So this tensile and compressive alternation will be there. Not only that, because of this, there is the bending also, that is, because if you consider the connecting rod as a bar, there is a chance that there will be a case of buckling also in the connecting rod about its axis. So it develops tensile, compressive and bending stresses, which are changing. Same thing happens with the crank also. The other shaft, which is the crank, the last class, other class, I had rather tried to draw the crankshaft. This crank and the crankshaft, they are not a straight shaft. Here also I have tried to draw. At the bottom part you can see crank pin, crankshaft I have drawn. This crankshaft is not a straight shaft. There are 2 flanges, or you can say, they are connected by a pin that is called crank pin. And at the lower part, there is the shaft. So you see, it's a zigzag shaft, zigzag. And the connecting rod is coming to the crank pin. Why it is done? Because when the piston comes down, and when the connecting rod comes down, it has to go through the gap in the crankshaft, and again it has to go up. That's why that configuration is there. This thing, of course, is very difficult. I am feeling difficulty in explaining in this class because I don't have any way to explain it. Either I need the blackboard or I need the engine part in front of me. I'll just show you when I start the thing in the laboratory. I'll show you the crankshaft configuration, then you'll be able to understand. But right now, take the idea that the crankshaft is not a straight shaft. It is a zigzag shaft. And there also, the fluctuation of stress is coming. That is the thing. So as a result, both the connecting rod and crankshaft, they are to have special manufacturing processes, and they are not manufactured by machining process, because machining is the process where we are cutting extra metal from the piece in order to give it a particular shape, and in that way we are damaging the component. We are cutting the grain lines. This thing, I think when you do the forging class, you will be told. So we go for forging. Forging is the process where we are making the metal red hot, just like a piece of wax, and allowing that we call it a plastic state. And then we allow the metal, which is in the plastic state, semi-solid. We allow it to flow in a particular cavity, or we make a cavity we call die. You know, die is a component where there is a groove, and in that die we put the molten metal, soft metal, and press it by a punch so that it gets a shape. This entire thing will be shown to you in the forging class. So basically, what is important, what I am not trying to underline, is that both the connecting rod and the crank and the crankshaft, crankshaft and crank pin are one body. Crank pin and crankshaft, they are one body, as I have shown in the figure below. You can see crank pin, crankshaft and crank, they are one integral body. And this integral thing is produced by forging. In order to provide some quality within the material so that it can withstand this change in fluctuation in stress, it develops high fatigue stress.
Hello sir, sorry to interrupt. Ritobroto is wanting to show something new. Ritobroto.
Wanting the piston to, yes, once again.
Hello, Ritobroto.
হ্যাঁ, সেটা দেখাতে পারবো, কিন্তু আমি একটা কথা বলছি, সেটা তুমি, এটা গুড সাজেশন, তুমি সেই সিমুলেশনটা যদি আমাকে পাঠিয়ে দাও, আমি সেটাকে লোড করে আমি দেখাতে পারবো, খুব ভালো। কিন্তু ঘটনাটা হচ্ছে, একটা ঘটনা আছে, সেটা হচ্ছে that the simulation cycle, I think it cannot be interrupted. I mean, when I go through that, you can see, but you cannot interrupt it. I mean, I cannot interrupt it to show a particular point of operation. You understand? But in any case, it's good. You can send it to me. সিমুলেশন তুমি পাঠাও, আমি তোমাদের দেখাবো। ইনফ্যাক্ট আমিও তোমাদের কতগুলো সিমুলেটেড দেখাতে পারি, কিন্তু সেগুলো আমি করতে পারবো না, কিছুদিন দেরি হবে, মানে পৌঁছে, মানে যখন maybe the beginning of next class, next month, will be able to. Okay, আর হার্ড কোর ইঞ্জিনটাই আমি দেখাতে পারবো, সেটাও একটা ব্যাপার। আচ্ছা, এবার এখন যে জায়গায়, যে জায়গাটায় আমরা বলতে চাইছি, মানে আমাদের উদ্দেশ্যটা কি? আমাদের উদ্দেশ্য হচ্ছে, we cannot right now show you the engine right now, so that's why I am trying to help it. I mean, trying to take the help of some diagrams, some words, because the internal combustion engine is such a thing which is very rather, if not impossible, it is very difficult to explain the nuances of the engine just in an online session. You know, I can show you the videography or anything, but even in spite of that, you will not be able to understand. You have to understand, if you will understand it only when you see the thing with your bare eyes, the hardware, the components, and how they are moving. That also you'll be able to see. Okay, so we'll wait for that because we are in a course, and the course is about the engine only. So we have time, and we'll definitely be able to show you. Now, we come back to the next point, that is the crankcase. You see there is a portion which is called crankcase. That means the casing of the engine, the cylinder, has come down and it has taken a spherical shape. It's called crankcase. And in this crankcase, within that space, the rotation of the crankshaft occurs. The rotation of the crankshaft, for that we require some three-dimensional space. The crankcase is that space. And also, it contains some liquid lubricating oil. The crankcase is a reservoir of lubricating oil. It holds as a storage of lubricating oil, so that when the crankshaft rotates inside the crankcase, it splashes that lubricating oil by centrifugal force on the inner surface of the cylinder. Can you visualize? Like when this crank gets dipped into the oil, and when it comes out at a high revolution per minute, at a high angular velocity, it will splash the lubricating oil all over the inner surface of the entire system. And that way, the inner surface of the cylinder over which the piston is sliding will get lubricated. It will reduce the wear and frictional forces. There is another reason that this lubricating oil is pumped through a board. This connecting rod is having a central hole. The connecting rod and the cranks are having central holes through which we are sending the lubricating oil through the connecting rod central hole into the piston, so that the oil can go onto the interface between the piston and the cylinder and can lubricate those surfaces also. So these things will be shown to you in due course. But we are trying to give you a fair idea about the engine from a two-dimensional diagram. So you understand, in a three-dimensional form, a cylinder, a three-dimensional cylinder closed at one end, three-dimensional piston, three-dimensional connecting rod, crank and crankshaft. These things are there. These are all the bare minimum items which I have drawn. I have not drawn lots of other things. I have shown you the valves also, but I have not drawn the flywheel. There is another wheel, it's called flywheel. I did not want to complicate this diagram. That's why I have not drawn it. There is a wheel which stores the extra power, extra energy during rotation, and which supplies that stored power when it is asked for by the engine. This thing I am going to explain, that the piston, when it moves up and down, it is not that the piston always produces power. Sometimes the piston produces power. Suppose the cycle consists of 4 strokes. 4 strokes means 4 journeys of the piston. down, up, down, up. Just imagine, piston comes from top dead center to bottom dead center. During this journey of the piston, the crank pin rotates by 180 degrees. Again, the piston comes from bottom dead center to top dead center. The crank pin rotates by another 180 degrees. So, two stroke journeys, that is two movements of the piston from top dead center to bottom dead center and from bottom dead center to top dead center. These two strokes correspond to 360-degree rotation of the crank pin, or rather 360-degree rotation of the crankshaft. And in a four-stroke engine, by name, it means that 4 journeys or 4 strokes are required. 4 strokes of the piston are required in order to complete one cycle. So one cycle will therefore mean that the crankshaft rotates by 720 degrees, that is 2 revolutions. 2 revolutions of the crankshaft corresponds to one thermodynamic cycle, that is called a 4-stroke engine. So by this we are also explaining you what is a 4-stroke engine. I will repeat. There are 2 varieties of engine. One is 2-stroke engine, another is 4-stroke engine. And 1 stroke is one travel, one journey from one top dead center to bottom dead center. That movement of the piston is 1 stroke. So those engines where 4 journeys, 4 travels, 4 strokes of the piston are required in order to complete one cycle, those engines are called 4-stroke engines. And those engines where one thermodynamic cycle requires only 2 journeys of the piston, that is one from top dead center to bottom dead center and from bottom dead center to top dead center. 2 journeys, 2 strokes, that is 1 revolution of the crankshaft, will be sufficient to complete one cycle. Those engines are called 2-stroke engines. There is no engine which is called 3-stroke engine, 1-stroke engine, 5-stroke engine, 7-stroke engine, 6-stroke engine. Those are not there. Only these 2 varieties are there. One in which 2-stroke movements of the piston. Now onwards I will only use the term stroke. I will not use journey, I will not use travel. Now we are going into technical terms. So 4 strokes, 4 movements of the piston, and that corresponds to 2 revolutions of the crankshaft, 720 degrees. And the other one, 2-stroke engine, means 360-degree rotation of the crankshaft. So if you are told that we have a 4-stroke engine running at 3000 revolution per minute, we have a 4-stroke engine running at 3000 revolution per minute. That means in 1 minute there will be 3000 revolutions, rotations of the crankshaft. And 2 revolutions correspond to 1 cycle because it is a 4-stroke engine. 3000 revolution means 1500 cycles. So in that engine, total number of thermodynamic cycles completed per minute is 1500 in 60 seconds. So per second, it will be only 25 cycles. Just imagine, what is 1 second? You look at your watch, get the feeling. 1 second is the time required to complete 25 cycles of the engine. And 25 cycle means, each cycle means 4 journeys of the piston. So 25 cycle means 25 into 400 journeys of the piston. So you imagine how much time the piston is going to take for completing one of its stroke, that is 1 journey from one dead center to other dead center. heavy, I mean 1/100th of a second.
See.
So it is pretty fast. All operations, there are 4 movements of the piston in one cycle, 4 journeys. So 4 journeys is going to take 0.04 seconds. 0.04 seconds should be the time to complete one complete cycle. One cycle consists of many operations: suction of the gas, compression of the gas, spark production, ignition, combustion, power generation, exhaust. Then again suction starts. So all these operations must be complete within 0.04 seconds. So because there will be 25 cycles in 1 second. So that is why now it becomes very important, very crucial for us. When we design the engine, it is such a high-speed phenomenon. All the heat transfer, all the work transfer, all the mass transfer has to occur quite fast. And the components are going to be subjected to heavy amount of mechanical stress, reversible stress, and also thermal stress. Because whenever there is a compression, whenever there is a combustion, there will be generation of heat, and that, you see, the combustion occurs where? That occurs just below the spark plug. See, this engine, what I'm trying to explain to you, is a spark ignition engine. That is why I have shown a spark plug. The ignition starts by spark. But there is another variety. These spark ignition engines are also called petrol engines. There is another variety which are called diesel engines, where there are no spark plug. And the ignition is because of excessive compression of the gas. That is, the ignition is caused due to compression. It is called compression ignition, CI. Now you can ask the question, why in a petrol engine, why should we not go for compression ignition? And why should we go for compression ignition only in case of a diesel engine? The reason lies in the answer that there is a term known as compression ratio, which I tried to explain last class also. It is a ratio between the volume when the compression starts divided by the volume when the compression ends. So the volume at the beginning of compression by volume of the gas at the end of compression, that is the compression ratio. And this compression ratio for a petrol engine is limited between 4 to 8, maximum 10. And for a diesel engine, it is 12 to 24, maximum 30. So that means for a diesel engine, the compression ratio is pretty high compared to that for a petrol engine. And because the compression ratio is high, the gas which is compressed in a diesel engine is compressed to a higher pressure, higher temperature. When you are compressing a gas, when you compress it, its pressure and temperature both will increase. And because we are compressing it to a higher compression ratio, temperature and pressure of the gas will be increasing to a very high value for a CI engine, because the compression ratio is high. That will not be the case in case of a petrol engine or SI engine, where the compression ratio is low. You are definitely going to ask me why should we, why we are contemplating such things. Why should we not give a high compression ratio to the petrol engines? The reason is that if we do that, if we increase the compression ratio beyond the range from 4 to 8, that is the range. If we go beyond that, it would have been fine, we would have been happy, but it is not possible, because in that case the petrol fuel will have an abnormal combustion, that is called auto ignition or detonation of petrol engine.
Can you repeat this again?
Yes. Hello?
Yes, sir. Means the reason of this abnormal combustion.
Yes. That is the phenomenon of abnormal combustion in a petrol engine that occurs when the compression ratio is, this abnormal combustion is a combustion phenomenon which is imbibed in the very character of that fuel, that is petrol. It is prone to abnormal combustion. We don't want that the fuel burns abnormally. Why? Because if it burns abnormally, there will be abnormal noise, abnormal vibration, abnormal friction. There will be abnormal development of thermal stress. All the moving components will be subjected to abnormal stresses, abnormal fluctuating stresses, abnormal fatigue stress, and abnormal chance of failure of the crankshaft. All these things will occur one after the other in a chain. We do not want that. That's why we want that the normal combustion should occur. And we have found that this phenomenon of abnormal combustion, that is called autoignition. There is another abnormal combustion which is called pre-ignition. Now this phenomenon is directly related to the compression ratio. If we have more compression ratio, higher compression ratio, chance of autoignition or detonation increases. If we have, that is the reason why we have limited our compression ratio up to a certain maximum value. We cannot go beyond that. If we go beyond that, all the petrol engines will be having auto ignition or detonation. We will not do that. So we'll have.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, knocking is which one, sir? Auto ignition or pre ignition?
Knocking is auto ignition.
Okay, sir.
Detonation is auto ignition. But pre-ignition is also another phenomenon, but we'll explain it. That is again another thing. That is when the ignition occurs before the spark. We want the spark should be first taking place. After the spark, the fuel should start igniting. After the igniting of the fuel, there will be combustion. You see, this is a very, 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 very fast chemical process. You see, the total cycle for a 3000 RPM engine, total cycle time is 0.04 seconds. Total cycle time. And out of that, there is through the entire cycle time, there will not be spark and combustion. Spark and combustion has to take, say, few nanoseconds or few microseconds. So that means when 720 degrees is the angle rotated by the crankshaft for a particular cycle, which corresponds to 0.04 seconds, for the spark to occur and the combustion to take place, suppose the crankshaft has to rotate only by maybe 2-3 degrees of rotation, 2 to 3 degrees, maybe 2.8 degrees, something like that. So it is a very small amount of time. During that time, spark has to occur, ignition has to occur, combustion has to occur. So you now understand how fast should be the process. Again, we want to control that combustion. We want to control that liberation of heat. We do not want that entire amount of heat gets liberated at a particular instant. It should be, there should be a DIDT or say PDT, pressure rise during the combustion with respect to time, dp dt, should be continuous. It should not be discontinuous. It should be having a continuous slope. With respect to crank angle rotation theta, if you plot the increase in pressure with temperature, that is the slope dp dt, if you plot dp dt with theta, the crank angle rotated, you should get a smooth gradient. So for that, again, there are lots of things to be done. See, what is my objective right now is that, you see, I know that these things are all different chapters. I am touching different chapters. I am touching the engine chapter, I am touching the ignition, I am touching the combustion, I am touching the pressure development, I am touching the failures, I am touching the performance in today's class, because I am now trying to give you an idea of the entire thing. It looks so simple, you see, when you look at this drawing, such a small thing, such a simple thing, but it is a very, 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 very complicated thing. And that is because of that we are having all sorts of prime movers, all sorts of vehicles are using this technology. Of course, the later, more advanced next generation technology will be if we can make the power to be transmitted from rotation to rotation. Here we are transmitting it from reciprocation to rotation, translation to rotation rather, reciprocation to rotation. But if we can do it from rotation to rotation, then the loss of power in the mechanism from translation to rotation will be saved, because whenever we are trying to change, you know what is inertia of a system, you know that any system having mass has got inertia. Now when you are having an inertial system having inertia, and if you force it to change its character, that is, it is moving in a straight line and you want to move it in a rotational line. Some point of a linkage is moving in a reciprocating rotation straight line, and some other point in the linkage you want it to rotate. So there will be a opposition from the system, and that opposition will take away some energy. That will be a loss, and we call it frictional loss. But the ultimate thing is that we reduce the frictional loss. Then we have the maximum efficiency. We are trying for it. It is possible. We have developed also, but it is not economic in the smaller range of power. When the power requirement is very high, then we go for turbine systems. We go for rotodynamic systems. We are gaining a lot when the requirement is 25 megawatts, 50, 100, 500, 2000 megawatts. But when the requirement is only 50 kilowatt, 100 kilowatt, then it is not, recommendable to go for a rotodynamic system, because the rotodynamic systems are very costly, very costly. Cost effective it will not be. So that's why out of the total population of prime movers, 90%, more than that, maybe 95% is comprising of this kind of reciprocating internal combustion engines. And that is why we have to first study it.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, may I ask one question, sir?
Yes. No, why one?
Oh, okay, sir.
You will limit your questions. You asked.
Yes, sir. The thing is, sir, whenever I hear like generators or all these things for power generation or for slightly heavy duty machines, I can hear about engines that are run on diesel. Diesel engines mostly for heavy duty purposes. But for light duty, generally petrol is used. But I have also heard that petrol engines rev to a much higher RPM than diesel engines. So then why is this
These
thing
questions
happening?
will be answered when we come through the when we go through the comparative discussion for two-stroke and four-stroke engines and SI engines and CI engines. We are going to coming to it. I'll also tell you in short now. The basic thing is that, you know, for heavy-duty operations, as you are telling, heavy-duty operation means when the requirement of power is high. Say, for example, is that a bus, a truck, or say a ship, you understand, jahaj. The requirement of power is very, very large. So there we are not using the petrol engines. There we are not using the two-stroke engines. Why? The reason is that the diesel fuel, as a matter of fact, has a higher calorific value than petrol. Hello, can you hear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're clearly audible, sir.
Now, diesel fuel is less costly. I mean, of course, now, courtesy the government policy, the diesel fuel is now going to catch up the petrol in terms of its cost. But I mean, it is a normal practice all over the world that diesel is at least 30–40% cheaper than petrol. So it is producing more calorific value per combustion of 1 kg. It is going to produce more thermal energy, and it is costing much less. So that's why people will prefer the use of diesel in large heavy-duty operations, because in heavy-duty operations your requirement of fuel is also very large. This is one of the reasons I'm giving you. That for heavy-duty operations, if you use high-quality petrol, your fuel cost will be very high. You take the case of a aircraft. In an aircraft, we are not using diesel as a matter of principle. Why? Because diesel is not refined to the level of that of petrol. It is a less refined oil. So that is one thing. Secondly, it contains impurities. It develops gluey items, gums, adhesive type items during combustion. And when there is insufficient combustion, incomplete combustion for diesel, it develops particles of coke and particles of carbon. And that particles of carbon mix with the oil, sits on the engine components. It can choke certain portions of valves, cause some accident also in the aircraft, because in the aircraft, all the components are very delicate. The fuel which is coming through an injection nozzle, the opening of the nozzle is very, 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 very small. And if that opening is clogged because of a carbon particle, then you know the fuel will not be able to move. And fuel will not be able to move into the cylinder, it will not burn, and the entire aircraft will fall down. There will be a crash. That's why in the aircraft, always we go for high quality, it is called high quality petrol. This high quality, it's not an ordinary petrol which is used in a car. It is highly refined petrol and it's highly costly. So that is the case because of its application. There we are not using diesel. Though the power
sir, I have heard once that kerosene is used.
No, I am not having any idea about that. Kerosene cannot be used in aircraft. Are you talking about aircrafts?
Yes, sir. Commercial jets. Refined kerosene. I mean jet aviation fuel or whatever it is called, sir. Something like that.
Not in car engines, not in truck engines, not in aircraft engines, but I tell you where it is used. In case of, have you seen showrooms like in Goriahat or like marketplaces,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Garment shops or jewelry shops, where you will have small Honda type gensets, small. I mean, they are used in order to power up a small shop, or when there is a load shedding, it will supplement the power. Those cases, small engines, there we are using kerosene sometimes. Kerosene can be used. I am not saying that it is not, cannot be used. But it will not be able to provide you the amount of power which you need for the application of the engine. Like why we are not using petrol for heavy duty operations? Another reason is there. Because petrol engines can operate with a low compression ratio. I told you slightly back that compression ratio for a petrol engine is much less. And because the compression ratio is less, the power generation, which you can discuss the air standard cycles I have already completed. You see, the thermal efficiency is a function of the compression ratio, RC. Where if it is the Otto cycle, 1 minus 1 by RC to the power gamma minus 1, that is the expression of the thermal efficiency. 1 minus 1 by RC to the power gamma minus 1. That is for the Otto cycle. For the diesel cycle, 1 minus 1 by... Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. 1 minus 1 by RC to the power gamma minus 1 into some other term, some other factor. So RC is important, and 1 upon RC to the power something determines that. If RC is high, then efficiency is high. If RC is low, efficiency is low. You understand my logic? If compression ratio is high, thermal efficiency is high. If compression ratio is low, thermal efficiency is low. For petrol engines, compression ratios have to be lower than the diesel engines. They have to be up to 8, because otherwise there will be detonation. So we cannot use a petrol engine if we have 20. So that's why we cannot use a petrol engine for heavy duty power operations, where the requirement of power generation is high. So RC should be high. We should use such engine where the RC should be high. And so, sorry, there is a disruption.
ল্যাপটপটাই না যায়।
Just a minute. Yes.
একটা ন্যাকড়ান একটা শিগগিরি। ও ভগবান, পুরো কি করে স্লিপ করে গেল, এটা ধরতে গিয়ে পুরো একদম উল্টে গেল।
Sorry, there is a disruption. মানে আমার ল্যাপটপের উপরে পায়েস পড়ে গেছে। একটু চুপচাপ বসো।
বাবা তোমাকে না, বাবা কিন্তু করেনি, এটা আমারই হয়েছে।
Yes, sir. We can change.
একটু পরে বলো, এটাকে ঠিক করে নিয়ে।
No problem.
No problem, sir.